We're going to talk about inverse functions. Make sure you take notes and write down all the examples. So we're going to start with what is a function. Remember, a function is we take an input, which we call x, and it gives us an output, which we express as y. Another way to say this is we travel from the domain to the range via a function. So what is an inverse function? Is there a function to take us back from the output to the input? If there is, we call it an inverse function. So it takes the output and gives us the input. So what is an inverse function? The inverse of a function has the same points of the original function except the x values and y values have been reversed. So let's look at this table. We have f of x equals 2x plus 4, where our points are negative 1, 2, 0, 4, 1, 6, 2, 8. The inverse, which we express as f to the negative first equals x of x, we just call that the inverse of f, and x and y's just switch. So keys to inverse functions, the notation. Like I said, that is not to the negative 1 power. We just call this f inverse, the inverse function of x. It is not the negative 1 power. Not all functions have an inverse. How do I find the inverse of a function? So we write the original function. We solve for x. Get it to read x equals the function. We switch x and y, and then we substitute the inverse of x in for y. So for this example, we have y equals 4x minus 2. We have to solve for x first. So we add 2. We get y plus 2 equals 4. Then we have to divide by 4. So we get y plus 2 over 4 equals x. We write that as x plus 2 over 4 equals the inverse of f of x. So we switched x and y and changed y to the inverse. Is there an inverse to a function? Just like we do the vertical line test to see if a graph is a function, we can do the horizontal line test to see if the inverse is a function. So if it fails the horizontal line test, then the inverse is not a function. Think of a quadratic parabola. If it passes the vertical line test, so it is a function, it does not pass the horizontal line test. If I draw horizontal lines through the parabola, it's going to hit more than one point, so it's not a function. So to prove two functions are inverses algebraically, if you have two functions, g of x and f of x, you can prove they are inverses algebraically by plugging in g of x into x for f of x and simplify, and then plug f of x into x for g of x and simplify. So we're doing the composition of the functions for both ways. When simplified, you should get x for both. If you do not get x for both, that means they are not inverses of each other. So determine if g of x and f of x are inverses of each other. So let's use f of x equals 3x minus 2 and g of x equals x plus 2. So first we're going to plug g of x in for x in f of x. So we're going to take the entire g of x and plug it into the x and then simplify. So when we simplify, we get x plus 2 minus x plus 2 minus 2, so we just get x. So then we have to do it the other way, plug f of x into x in g of x. So you're going to take f of x and plug it into x and g of x, and then simplify. We get 3x divided by 3, which is just x. So they are inverses of each other. Make sure you write down all your notes and bring any questions you have to class tomorrow.